I'm Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this is Outside My Window. Next week, May 3rd to the 9th, will mark the 70th Annual Canadian Mental Health Association's Mental Health Week. Now, more than ever, we have been thrust into being aware of ours and others' mental health. This year's tagline for the week is Get Ready to #GetReal, about how you feel. Even in times of extreme anxiety and stress, mental health is something we need to protect. For some resources and information, take a minute to go to mentalhealthweek, all one word, .ca. On this week's show, we are going to chat with three guests that each have their own perspectives when it comes to mental health. Audrey Vaughn, Mae Mitchell, and then we chat with the current Nova Scotia Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honourable Zach Churchill. Our guest is Audrey Vaughn. Audrey was born in Oromocto, New Brunswick. Her father was in the military for nearly 30 years. Both parents were from Wageport, so when her father retired in 1979, the family moved there, so she says this area is home. She just moved back to Yarmouth after having been away and living in Oromocto for over 16 years. Now, COVID, she says, taught her that she could work from home, and since she's got the best boss ever, he said she didn't care where home was. Audrey is a strong advocate for mental health. She says she personally has been affected by it and have seen how the lack of resources affects everyone. She also knows personally the stigma and shame a person carries when they're dealing with mental health issues. She chaired a fundraising event for Canadian Mental Health Association in Moncton 2 years in a row. She's thankful for the experiences and the friendships made in Moncton, but this is home, and she says she's beyond thrilled to be back. Audrey, welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
Audrey, you have been a long time an advocate for mental health and improvement to mental health services, and you speak from experience. With whatever you're comfortable telling us about your experiences so that perhaps it could relate to so many people out there, can you talk about that?
So, myself personally and family members as well, we've been in the situation where we've needed help, and sometimes I've been very fortunate. The professionals that I've met up with have been what I've needed, and sometimes it takes medication, sometimes it takes counseling. It's just every once in a while, that the depression or the anxiety just gets a grip on me that I have a hard time getting through, and I need the extra support for it. I've also been in a situation trying to get support for somebody else that just wasn't there, and it's frustrating to go to an emergency department and have mental health treated any differently than any other illness. Or, I often say if it was a broken bone, they would bring in the specialist that this person needs at that time. And we're still not treating mental illness the same way. It's not something a person can shake off. You can't just walk it off. And I'm just really advocating so that people won't be afraid to speak out and say, this is what I struggle with, this is the help that I need, and that people, just accept it the same way they would if somebody says, I'm diabetic, or, I've been diagnosed with cancer, or, we've got to treat all of these the same because, the struggle that people go through and the resources that they need and the help that they need, it's all the same. We just look at it differently. We've lost too many, and we keep losing young people, and I just so want it to change because, when cancer started taking a lot of people, then all of a sudden, we were all fighting for more resources for cancer treatments, and so now I'm saying, we need the same for mental health. It's got to be there.
How hard is it, Audrey, to ask for help? In order for you to get help that you need from a mental health standpoint, you have to ask.
You do. And I remember the first time sort of acknowledging to a friend of mine that I was going through something. We went for lunch one day, and she said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I'm in a funk." And I looked at her and I said, and I think if I give it a really cool name that it won't be as bad. And she said, really? And I said, yeah, but that's not working. And she said, so what do you need to do? And I said, well, I need to call my doctor. And so I made the appointment, and he sat there and he just asked me very, different questions. It almost seemed like we were just having a very, casual conversation. But he kept taking notes as he went along. And then at the end of it, he just circled everything that I'd said. And he said, do you know what this means? And I said, no, not exactly. And he said, it means right now that you're going through depression. And he was right on board as far as, okay, we need to get you counseling, and I was so very fortunate to have him. But the first time he had to take me off work and he had to write on the form, major depression, part of me felt like I had failed something. And then he sat me and he says, why are you feeling like this? And I couldn't explain it to him. And then he had to walk me through what I already knew. It's not something I can shake off. It wasn't something that I failed at. It's something that I needed help for, and I needed to be taken off of work for a short period of time in order to get the help that I needed. And so I just want people to understand, like, you haven't failed. You need help, and be willing to ask for it, and be willing to ask more than one person seriously. If the first person doesn't take you seriously, or if you're not in front of the person that you need to be in front of, then ask to see somebody else.
Do you think it's easier, Audrey, for women to ask for help in a situation like this than men?
I think it is more difficult for men. And I think it's just that society has made it that way. How many times have you heard the term, just man up? And, so we're saying to them, how many times were young boys told they weren't supposed to cry over something, or, and we're asking them to mask their feelings and to not acknowledge them. And if we're telling them to not acknowledge their feelings, then how could we ever expect them to ask for help when they needed it?
Is there an underlying issue here that needs to be addressed first and foremost? Now, we did see just recently that the Nova Scotia government, under the new premier and new health minister Zach Churchill, there is seems to be a new focus, hopefully, on improving access to health care services. Do you think, Audrey, it's a matter of just pouring money into it, or does some long-term strategy need to be developed to tackle these real problems and find a real solution?
I think it's a matter of, there's a lot of things. I think it's a matter of money needs to be invested, long-term solutions, and education. I think there's an education behind it too that has to be had. I think in schools we should be talking about these things.
When I was in school, you had a school counselor. Now, mind you, the school counselor was normally responsible for trying to guide you in the right direction when it came to your career choices and the like. But do you think that maybe there should be a professional on staff in most schools to help deal with the emotional and other challenges that the internet has brought us?
I do, because I think that we're asking our educators to be able to step into that role, and that's putting a lot on an educator. We need the professionals in there. That's what they're trained for. Educators are trained to be educators, and they wear so many different hats, and they do. And I think that we need a professional in there to help support the educators who are helping to support our kids.
What would you suggest they do if they're just afraid to reach out, if they're scared?
It is a scary step to take, but you have to and reach out and talk to somebody, and talk to somebody you trust. Or there's so many, and there's the toll-free numbers and the helplines that they can use, and reach out to your physician, but you have to. I mean, I can't say that enough. It's not something that you can that you can carry yourself, you do need to ask for the help and find somebody that you trust, that you can talk to, and just believe that it can get better. You've got to see that too.
Audrey, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for sharing your story and your personal thoughts. We appreciate it very much. I know in my heart that somewhere out there, your message will get through and someone will reach out for help. We appreciate it so much, and we look forward to your daily postings and your songs and your hi to your mom and all of that. Audrey, thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to speak about this, because I do feel very strongly about it, and I'm going to keep fighting for it as long as I can and as long as I have to.
Scott and Kelly Mitchell opened Aiden's Place in 2019 after they lost their 14-year-old daughter, Aiden Mae, following a mental health-related overdose. Kelly is the acting executive director in charge of 26 volunteers doing their best to support the youth in our community as they maneuver through life struggles on a daily basis. Kelly believes that peer support, life skills, self-love, and self-care are essential in creating and maintaining mental wellness for all ages. Our youth are no exception. At the Purple House, youth ages 11 to 17 are taught the skills they need to gain independence, self-respect, and an appreciation of their community. In order to keep our youth alive, we need to help them find a purpose and a love for their life and those around them. We asked Kelly about the history of Aiden's Place and how it came to be.
Well, it was back in February of 2019. We lost our daughter, Aiden. She was 14 years old. And we lost Aiden. Actually, Aiden was battling some mental health issues of her own. At that age, young ages, it's very hard to diagnose what the problem is, because what we're told is their personalities are still developing and things become a little difficult with hormones and such. So we weren't really sure what we were dealing with at the time. So over a couple of years, we found out that things were getting a little more serious than we'd expected, and she progressed to a stage of overdosing. And after 4 or 5 attempts, she overdosed on a medication that ended her life after 5 days in intensive care in the IWK in Halifax. So when that happened, by then Yarmouth had lost 2 girls, both within the previous 2 years, and we've lost a few since then, as everyone's aware. But what happened with us is we found through our journey that as a parent, we didn't have a lot of resources. When it came to the healthcare system, our daughter was 12. So any of her counseling, we were not privy to. It was all private for her. So we had the ability to help her at home, but no knowledge. Everything was private, and she wasn't in a state to really look after herself. So we really felt a disconnect. And even though we couldn't do anything much about that disconnect, we wanted to start a place where kids could come have someone to talk to, and maybe parents even could get a little bit of resources or help or have someone to talk to as well if they needed it. So the idea behind Aiden's Place kind of came to be partially because of that, partially because of at the time Toronto County Mental Health and Wellness was reaching out to us wondering if we may be interested in putting something together for the youth. So between them and us, the idea came to be. And we've been here ever since, kind of trying to help youth that may end up down the same path that our daughter did, and try to help them and the parents with how to navigate that system a little bit better.
So was there no resources at that point specifically targeting youth?
That age range was nothing for that age range. I mean, we tried private counseling for quite a while. We weren't really getting anywhere with it. We didn't notice a huge improvement or decline in her overall. The overdoses continued and would get a little bit more common. So it was recommended by her doctor at the time, who of course is everybody's doctor in this area, because we're in Yarmouth. We don't have the access to the same types of things the city does. So other than her going to the doctor, getting a prescription, talking through her problems with somebody every couple of weeks, that was it. We didn't have anything else at our disposal, or were not made aware if there was anything else. So it's very frustrating, especially when your child's young and you want to help them when they're young enough you want to get it in there young enough to make a difference before their personalities are developed. And that was what we found we were lacking, the ability to find resources for her age range.
So with Aiden's Place comes an opportunity to help youth in the community. Is it really any youth that wants to pop in? Is it like a drop-in center sort of thing? I mean, I'm showing my
It is.
age a bit, by saying that.
Yeah. No, I still use the same term as well. It is basically just that, except we're not doctors, we're not therapists. We can't diagnose, we can't prescribe anything, and we don't want to. We want the youth to come in and say, "Hey, my doctor's got me, on a certain eating plan, or they've got me on a certain schedule and I need help, or can you help me through it?" Or we can say to them, "How are you making out today? Is there anything you need? Can we support you through anything?" It's somewhere for them to go to talk to where they're not being talked at, they're not being told what to do or how to do it. They are young adults. They need to come up with their own plans. They need to learn how to cope. They need the coping skills. We can help them with all of that, but they need to make the decisions, and they need someone that's going to be there with them, just kind of not driving them in any particular direction, but holding their hand and giving them someone to talk to through it. And sometimes it's as little as, we have programs like meals after school. We have an bedtime snack, morning snacks, lunch snacks they have access to. They can take a package when they leave at night. We have clothing programs. So aside from like the life skills part of it, there's also just making sure that we're doing our part to help them with food poverty and clothing poverty and all of those things as well. So we've got anything that they need. If they come and they need it, we will help them get it, whether it's a program we run or not. We just want to be there for anything in the world that can alleviate any stresses off of their shoulders and make their days just a little bit easier for them to cope.
I know it's been a while since I was that age. It's been at least 40 years since I was a teenager, but have things changed that much in 40
Oh
years?
my gosh, things have changed so much. Um, I'm 44 now. I grew up in Yarmouth, was here my whole life. I left for 3 years for university and came back. And growing up as a teenager in Yarmouth when I was young is not like anything that I've ever seen. The kids coming in nowadays, it's a shock, the stuff that they're exposed to, what they're aware of, what they have at their fingertips, even if it's through the internet, what they're facing at home. We've always had issues with things like, poverty and, broken homes. All those things have always been there. But the way the kids are dealing with them nowadays, the coping skills aren't there. We grew up to know you went out and you played. If there was a problem, you worked through it. Things are so different now. If there's something severely missing, and I don't know what it is or how to pinpoint it, but it seems like we're really letting our kids down by not giving them the basics that they need to learn how to cope. It's almost like we're trying to fix everything for them, and at the end of the day, that doesn't help anybody. So we just want to be those people that are helping them learn the skills, them implement them, teach them how to cope and work through things. We're not there to hand them solutions or pretend that we can. But it's a much different world. And I'm shocked with the kids that come through the door every day and the things that they're dealing with. It's stuff that at 44, I've never had to deal with. And it's very sad. And the mental toll it takes just listening to it, I couldn't imagine the toll it's taking on these youth living it every day.
Within the community, you've got resources like the Shift House.
Yes.
Are you in complement with that, or are you at a different level?
I think a little bit of both, actually. We're the new ones on the block. Of course, we've only been at this a year and a half, but in the last six months or so, since we moved onto Main Street in the Purple House, we've had very many people, a lot of these groups reach out to us. Shift House has offered support and help with grant writing and come down to visit us. Parents' Places come in to see what we have for resources. Lang House, I'm going to be meeting with them next week. They're coming down from Halifax. It's like we're finally realizing that we're all here to help each other and complement each other. We're not here to compete against one another. And what we have for resources may not be the exact thing that our youth need that day, but somebody else in the community might. There's options that I found out at Parents' Place that I didn't know existed. So some of our youth or their younger siblings or their parents, I can refer there if there's something they need. or if one of our youth is 17, or passes kind of that threshold out of our care into 18, I know more now what shift house has available for them, and by Monday I'll know more about what Lang House has available. So I think it's very important that a lot of these organizations, especially in small towns like ours, get together and pool the resources, focus on what each one's really good at, and use the other ones to their advantage, almost as an extension of themselves. And that's what I'd like to see happen. We are unique in the sense that we're kind of a different age range. We're seeing these youth before they're getting to shift house or Lang House. But at the same time, there are things we can do to work together.
In the community being what it is, if you had a wish list of a couple of things, what would they be?
I think right now, from what I have seen, is better access to mental health for the youth, in the sense that we have youth that I'm told have been on waiting list for counseling or to get in for mental health for, a month, 2 months, 3 months. 5 minutes is a long time for a youth. They'll
Wow.
go up to the hospital, and if they're waiting for 2 or 3 hours, they're gone. They don't stay. They need something quicker access, and it's not the fault of anyone so much. It's just, I think what's happening, what I see is I see such a growth of mental health obstacles amongst our youth that I think it's very hard for the system we've had to keep caught up. I think it's advancing quicker than our systems can kind of catch up and accommodate it. And I don't know what could ever fix that, but my number one goal would just be that, or my one wish, I guess, would be that our youth could have a little bit better access to the things that they need when they need them. There's places like us that are just peer support based. Like I said, we're not doctors, we're not counselors, we're not therapists, but we can at least bridge that gap until their next appointment. But we can only do so much. And we're new and we're learning as we go as well. But more people for these youth to embrace why they're waiting for that next doctor's appointment or therapist appointment is very important.
What could we do maybe to help the parents understand a little better about how the dynamic for teenagers are right now?
I think that's probably very important because that is one thing that's missing. I know that when our daughter was in junior high and high school, they would have mental health days where they would have big events go on in the auditorium and talk to the youth about things. There was never anything where the parents were ever talked to, or I don't ever see anything advertised where the parents can go in and say, listen, I want to start asking some questions. I need to know what's going on in the youth. I mean, you can ask your child, I suppose, but the parents really should have some kind of an outreach where they can go, or an event, once a year where they can ask these questions, because there's a lot going on that I think a lot of parents don't understand. They will probably try to brush it off as, drama or hormones, those types of things. But if the parents understood, maybe part of it's just that they don't understand and they don't know how to deal with it, or they don't know how to start those conversations.
So Mental Health Week is coming up next week, May 3rd and
Yes.
9th. What are your hopes for what might come out of Mental Health Week?
We don't have anything specific planned yet, but we are usually planning things last minute. So I'm not going to say nothing's going to be planned, because it definitely will. We kind of let the kids kind of pick. We say, hey guys, this is what's coming up next week. What do you have in mind? And the ideas they come up with are incredible. So that is something I know will get left in the hands of the youth to decide how they want to give back to the community during that week. But what I would wish for, or what I would ask everybody to do during that week, is take a couple minutes to somebody that's close to you, anybody, maybe it's just people in your family. Give them a few extra minutes of your time, check in with them, see how they're actually doing. Like you said, COVID especially has done a job on a lot of people in every age. It's not any age in particular. I know some of the strongest people I've known in my life that COVID has brought them to their knees, and I would never have imagined in my life. It's unbelievable what it's doing to the strongest of people. So is there's nobody that isn't going to be impacted by mental health in any way. And if you yourself directly aren't, somebody is. So take a couple minutes and just check in with people around you, see how they're doing.
Our guest is the Honourable Zach Churchill. Mr. Churchill was first elected to the Nova Scotia House of Assembly as MLA for Yarmouth in a by-election in 2010 and was re-elected in 2013 and 2017. He has served as Minister of Natural Resources, Minister of Municipal Affairs, Minister of Communications Nova Scotia, and Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development. He was a policy analyst and a student organizer. He's also Minister of Health and Wellness and Minister responsible for the Office of the Mental Health and Addictions, and that's going to be our focus in this particular segment. First of all, Minister, I want to mention we spoke with a couple of guests on our podcast recently who have had their own personal experiences with mental health and also talked about their individual challenges that they faced in trying to seek some help. So, you know, as you're part of your portfolio, as we mentioned, Minister responsible for the Office of Mental Health and Addictions. So, you know, are there some shortcomings that you're aware of in mental health services in this province, particularly maybe in rural areas like Yarmouth?
Well, definitely on some fronts there are. Access to psychiatry has been a challenge. There has been a global shortage of psychologists and psychiatrists, but we have managed to recruit some new ones to the province. In the last couple of years, we've added about 35 mental health clinicians, including a host of psychiatrists, and we have benefited from having 2 additional here at Yarmouth Regional. But it's also about increasing access to mental health services through other means. So some of the real focuses right now are on increasing access through virtual care. Application of our virtual care medical supports is probably best utilized in a mental health circumstance and for those seeking support in this area because it doesn't always require the physical observations that a doctor would have for other illnesses that you might be dealing with. So that is a big focus of ours to expand that virtual care network and fill some of the demand that we do have in the mental health space because we definitely have seen an increase in demand over the last year over this COVID pandemic. We did have about an increase of 30% calls to our crisis line over this year. We did respond by increasing resources by 30% on the crisis line to respond to it. But while there are some challenges in this field, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening, not just in our healthcare system, but also in our schools. A real focus of our government while I was at the education department was on really bolstering our mental health and counseling services through our inclusive education spending in our schools. And so that was where we start to see kind of the real push to get more resources available to people, particularly our youth, who we know are dealing with things that through social media, dealing with various levels of bullying, in ways that are very different than any of us would have dealt with growing up. So that was a real focus. But I'm really excited to be here at this point in time in the health department because there's a real focus on increasing mental health, and we're approaching that in a number of ways.
I think, Minister Churchill, when we look at the youth factor just by itself, certainly tying it in with the school system is a great option. If the resources aren't available in a rural community, does it require travel into another community in order to be able to do that? I know you were talking about ramping up some virtual care. Is that what's going to fill the gap in, or are people still going to be faced with the possibility of having to travel?
Probably a bit of both, right? So I think really increasing access through virtual care is going to be very useful for people. It's going to make it more accessible. Being able to access mental health clinicians, whether it's a psychiatrist, psychologist, or another professional therapist, whomever you need, being able to access those folks through Zoom or telephone or even through chats. Online chats, I think will really increase access, and that has been happening, but we're going to start seeing more of that, and the federal government is supporting this initiative across the country, so we are receiving additional federal funding to enhance our virtual care network, but also it's about getting more people into our communities, into our schools who can help. So there are challenges to your question around recruitment of mental health professionals, like other health professionals. Definitely are some challenges that are unique to rural places in the country, and rural Nova Scotia is no exception to that. But we're actually seeing, some success there. We've managed to get 2 additional psychiatrists here in the Yarmouth area. We've done fairly well recruiting family physicians as well. And I think one of the key things we're focused on is also supporting community organizations that provide peer-to-peer support and that focus on teaching people how to cope and manage their stress and anxiety. And you mentioned you chat with Mae Mitchell. Our department just recently provided approximately 20 organizations across the province with funding to help, and who are doing work in this field of mental health and wellness. And Aiden's Place was one of the recipients. They received $125,000 to help them continue to do the great work that they're doing. Lane House also has received some funding, and they have a satellite office here in the Yarmouth area. And these local organizations, folks who know the people who know the adolescents they're dealing with, can be really helpful ways to deal with the non-acute mental wellness issues. So folks that are dealing with stress, trying to learn how to cope and manage life skills, those organizations can be very, very helpful for that. And for acute cases, if someone's dealing with, mental illness or an emergency situation, of course, those folks know where to refer them. And we tend to do really well with those acute cases in our province. If you need that immediate help, you usually do get the support that you need. It all, of course, depends on a clinician's assessment of you, and that can sometimes differ from, what the family members of that individual are looking for sure. But where we're seeing kind of the most pressure is on the non-urgent cases, where people are just kind of struggling with certain things, need people to talk to, need a bit of help to get them through rough patches. And that's where we're really going to see some enhancement of services.
When we look at funding, Minister Churchill, is it more so a task of the province to make sure that the programs are well funded and so on, or is it a function of the federal government to make sure that these sorts of programs are accessible to everybody across the board?
Well, health falls under provincial jurisdiction, so the primary funder of our healthcare system would be the provincial taxpayer, and the provincial government would be the ones administering those services. But we do get a health transfer from the federal government. It is on a per capita basis. One of the things we'd like to see here in Nova Scotia is our position would be it should be based more on demographic and what the needs are in each province, as opposed to just a per capita rate, because the health needs differ from province to province as demographics are different, and of course the individual needs can vary significantly. So we would like to see more of a focus on a needs assessment as opposed to just a per capita funding. But this federal government in particular has been very focused on health and well-being, and we've managed to secure some very significant funding through the federal government to enhance our own services. And recently we were seeing that with virtual care.
If someone is in immediate need of help, urgent need, what is the best way for them to reach someone that can potentially help them?
Well, we have a mental health crisis line that's 24/7. This is where we've seen, I think some significant improvements. Were before a few years ago, there was literally hundreds of phone numbers that people had in different communities across the province to call for help. Now we have one central intake line, and one phone number that can connect you with a mental health clinician immediately. Of course, 911 is always an issue too, depending on the circumstances. Obviously, if someone is in imminent danger or other people around them are, 911 would be the best option to call and get first responders on the scene, the appropriate ones. But if someone just needs to talk to someone very quickly, the mental health and addictions crisis line is is a good first step. And there's folks that mental health clinicians that work on that line 24/7, and they're available. And again, we've increased resources to that line because we did see an uptake, particularly over the last year. And I can provide that number for you folks if you like. The crisis line is 1-888-429-8167. And there's also the Kids Help Phone, which is available here as well, and that's 1-800-668-6868. Also, if you call 811 or 211 or 911, they can refer you to the appropriate folks as well. One area where we've seen some real improvement is on wait times for help. So for folks that need that urgent care, they're now, all of those folks are now being seen within a week. That's been a real improvement in Nova Scotia, and the median wait time is about 2 days. So that would be the average would be 2 days, but depending on the urgency of the case, everyone's getting back within a week. For non-urgent cases, you used to have a wait of over a year if you had a non-urgent mental health situation. We've now reduced that wait time to within a month. So there have been some significant improvements in this field, not just in our schools, but also in our through our health system as well. We are seeing some improvements, particularly on wait times and access. And that's not to say there's not a lot more work to do, or that this is giving everybody what they need, but we have hit some really important milestones.
How do we stack up against the other provinces?
Well, we're now when it comes to the averages for wait times for accessing support, we're competitive with the other provinces. We are competitive with the psychiatrists and mental health clinicians that we hire. But we also in Nova Scotia have half our population is rural. So that is different than some of our other provinces where they have a more dense population, and it's much easier to provide services in those circumstances or in cities, right? So in Nova Scotia we do have that some geographical challenges, obviously, to make sure there's access points for people, but with our with the fact that the majority of the province is going to be coming online with high speed in the next couple of years. Our expansion of virtual care, of the crisis line, which you just need a phone for, and getting mental health clinicians into rural areas and having some success with our recruitment efforts through the health department and also through our school system. We are seeing improvements in this area from an access point.
We mentioned Mental Health Awareness Week. That's coming up May 3rd to the 9th. Mr. Churchill, what does your department, what does the government have planned to kind of help raise that awareness during that week?
Well, we're engaged in awareness programs that happens online through our social initiatives. It happens through our press communications that go out that week. And we want people to be aware of the services that are available to them, and also that there's more services that are coming online. We're actually in the market right now for a mental health officer in the Department of Education. Department of Health and Wellness. So what we want to do is bring in an actual clinical lead within the department that can direct our mental health responses, not just in the Department of Health, but across the government departments that are involved in these kind of supports. So other ones would, of course, be like community services through our social worker program, and there's services available through the Justice Department as well, and, of course, education. So this person would provide that clinical leadership that's very focused on mental health in the department, and they're essentially going to help quarterback our cross-department response to this area and help build our capacity and ensure that our investments and the programs that we bring online are strategic and are going to have an impact. And I look at the clinical leadership of someone like Dr. Strang from a public health perspective, who's done an exceptional job advising government and providing us with well thought out recommendations and assessment around public health. We want to have, someone of similar capacity on mental health that are, going to do the same thing. And we've really seen the value of that clinical leadership with Strang. We now have a former surgeon who's the deputy minister of the department, and having another clinical lead who's going to be in charge of these programs, I think is going to be valuable long term as we continue to build capacity in this area and do a better job supporting people with their mental wellness challenges.
With the current state of things under COVID, it seems that every week should be Mental Health Week. Success can be measured on little things we can do for everyone around us, like, calling on our seniors, checking in to make sure they're doing okay. And don't assume they are. Call and ask. However, as someone once said, if you can be anything, be kind. It costs nothing to be nice to someone. I'm Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this has been Outside My Window.